My own son handed me an envelope and said, "It's for your own good," while his wife's eyes dared me to obey. My chest tightened, but instead of trembling, I folded the papers calmly and whispered, "Not today." Then one by one I tore the pages apart, each rip louder than any argument I could have made. They thought they had won, but that moment was only the beginning of something far greater. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. The bus pulled into the tiny Andalusian village just as the morning sun spilled across the whitewashed walls. I stepped down slowly the stone street uneven under my shoes, and I felt the weight of my own suitcase heavier than it should have been. Arthur had already leapt down Celine on his arm, her phone raised, tilting to catch the right angle of sunlight behind them. I looked up at the narrow streets, the iron balconies with pots of geraniums, and tried to breathe in the beauty. For a moment I told myself this was worth it, that maybe this trip would be a bridge between us. Yet as I stood there waiting while they checked their reflection in the black glass of the bus window, I felt like the outsider tagging along. I smiled to hide the thought. Maybe it was just the long flight, the change in air. Still deep inside, a whisper warned me, "Keep your eyes open." Celine's voice rose as we walked toward the small inn where we'd stay. "We'll head to the plaza first. The cafe has great tiles for the backdrop. I'll post it right away. Coffee in Spain." She glanced back at me briefly, then angled her phone to catch Arthur's profile. I remembered a chapel nearby, one I'd read about years ago when dreaming of Spain. "There's a small church on the hill I said I'd love to visit before the day gets too hot." Celine didn't even look up. "Nobody cares about dusty places, Mom. People want to see color movement food. Trust me." She tugged Arthur's hand. He just nodded, falling into step with her. I walked behind them, feeling my voice vanish into the sound of her clicking heels. My memory of the chapel faded into the cobblestones at my feet. At lunch, in a shaded courtyard filled with tourists, I realized none of the plans included me. The two of them scrolled through restaurant reviews debating which tapas place had the best photo walls. Celine kept saying, we erased me a little more. "We'll ride scooters tomorrow," she said. "We'll take the day trip for the Olive Grove shots." Arthur agreed, murmuring sounds perfect. I picked at the bread basket, nodding when they glanced at me. It was like being erased line by line, reduced to an extra in their couple's script. I thought of the years I'd worked double shifts saving so Arthur could go to college. I didn't expect gratitude. I expected not to feel invisible. Later that afternoon, as we argued quietly about transport to the next town, Celine smirked. "Don't worry, she'll manage. Old people always find a way, right?" Her tone was sweet as syrup, but sharp as glass. The words lodged in my chest. I forced a smile, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of seeing me wounded. Arthur looked away, pretending to study the bus schedule. The silence between us said everything his loyalty already bent would not straighten for me. That night, as I folded my clothes back into the suitcase, I thought of the years I had stood alone, raising him, carrying burdens he never knew. And here I was, reduced to a shadow on their holiday photos. I closed the case, gently pressing my palm against the lid as though sealing away my own ache. Something in me whispered, steady and certain, "Something feels wrong here." The square was alive with chatter, that afternoon umbrellas, casting shade over a line of tables scattered across the cobblestones. I followed Arthur and Celine into a cafe at the corner, its awning striped red and white. The waiter greeted them with a cheerful "Buenas tardes," and Celine took over, instantly rattling off words in Spanish with a confidence she had polished from travel blogs. Arthur chimed in with a phrase or two, grinning at her as if she were a native. I sat quietly smiling, but the words slipped past me like water. I had studied French in high school, not Spanish. I caught pan vino queso, but it wasn't enough to join the rhythm of their exchange. The waiter didn't look at me for an order. Celine had already chosen 2 plates of tapas, 1 glass of wine, 1 soda. I felt like a guest at someone else's table, my voice unnecessary. My fingers curled against the napkin, and I told myself it was fine that they were younger, quicker, more at ease. Still, my silence made the air around me heavy, as though I were fading into the background even under the bright Spanish sun. The waiter returned with menus, glanced at the three of us, and asked Treese. His hand hovered over the chairs. Celine's smile was sharp. No dose. She said it with such certainty the third chair might as well have been invisible. The waiter hesitated, then gently pushed the chair aside to clear space. When I returned from the counter where I had gone to wash my hands, I saw my seat angled out, a handbag dropped over it. Arthur's eyes flickered to mine, but he looked away quickly. A couple at the next table exchanged a glance, one of them whispering. A stranger leaned toward me, asking softly, "Are you joining them?" Before I could answer, Celine's laugh cut through. "She's just tagging along." The words landed like a slap, louder than the clinking glasses, louder than the chatter of tourists. My face burned. I forced a tight smile, sat on the edge of another chair nearby, and pretended the comment hadn't pierced me. Inside, humiliation swelled until I could barely swallow. Back at the inn that evening, the room felt smaller than before. I opened my suitcase, searching for comfort in the small things I had brought from home. My fingers reached for the photo album I always traveled with, the one filled with snapshots of Arthur as a boy. School plays the camping trip where he had held my hand crossing the creek. It wasn't there. Neither was the notebook where I kept pressed flowers receipts, little scraps of memory. I sifted through every pocket, even the zipped side compartments. Nothing. Then I remembered Celine insisting at the airport that she and Arthur redistribute the weight. She had pulled some of my belongings into their luggage. A cold realization struck me they weren't misplaced. They had been taken. My most personal keepsakes now hidden in the wrong hands. Betrayal came not with fire, but with the chill of knowing my history had been stripped from me in silence. I closed the lid of the suitcase and whispered to the empty room, "Even my memories don't belong here anymore." My voice shook, but I didn't allow tears. Dignity was all I had left. I sat on the bed, folded my hands, and forced myself into stillness. The walls hummed with quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your chest, but I kept it there, not letting it break me. Silence had always been my armor. Later, I glanced at my phone. The screen flashed low battery. I searched the room for an outlet, only to find one adapter already in use. I plugged in quickly, knowing I had only minutes before Arthur and Celine returned. Watching the tiny battery icon blink gave me a strange sense of kinship. My own strength felt drained but not gone. Even a sliver of power could carry me through the night. When the suitcase snapped shut, emptier than when I had arrived, I murmured into the quiet. Something precious was taken from me tonight. The room felt colder than it should have, though the air was heavy with the faint scent of lemon oil from the hallway. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment, listening to the laughter drifting up from the plaza below. The window was small, cut into the thick wall, framing only a slice of night sky. The bedspread was thin, patterned with faded flowers, and the chair in the corner wobbled when I set my purse on it. I sat down, staring at the tiled floor, my chest still burning from what had happened at the cafe. Downstairs, voices rose and fell alive with music and clinking glasses, while I sat alone, the quiet swallowing me whole. I tried to breathe it away, but my body felt heavy, as though the humiliation had soaked into my bones. My phone buzzed against the nightstand, startling me. I reached for it, expecting a message from home, maybe one of the neighbors checking in. Instead, Celine's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated, then opened it. "Don't be dramatic. Just call a taxi if you can't keep up." The words glared back at me in the glow of the screen. My stomach tightened. I read it twice, 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, meant for me. My hand shook as I set the phone down, then picked it back up, searching for some sign Arthur had objected. Nothing. His silence was written in the absence of words. I remembered his eyes at the cafe, how they darted away from mine. He had seen, he had chosen not to speak. Betrayal written in pixels, sealed by silence. The message felt sharper than Celine's smirk because this time it was permanent, undeniable, saved in my hand. Morning light spilled across the cobblestones as I stepped into the square. The village was waking up shops, opening, children running after a ball, an old man sweeping his doorway. Yet I felt eyes on me. Two women paused in their conversation as I walked past, lowering their voices, their eyes flicking toward me. A young man at the bakery counter nodded politely, then whispered something to the cashier as I left. I caught fragments in Spanish enough to know the old woman left behind. It wasn't just between us anymore. My shame had spilled into the open, carried by whispers. I couldn't stop. The humiliation was no longer private. It belonged to the village, now woven into their gossip. Each glance felt like a thread tightening around me, pulling me into the role of the abandoned, the unwanted. I drifted to the fountain at the center of the square. Water spilled from a stone lion's mouth, the sound steady, indifferent to the world around it. I sat on the cool edge watching children splash their hands in the pool, their laughter ringing clear. My chest ached as I remembered Arthur at that age, sticky fingers after ice cream running to me when he scraped his knee, holding onto my hand with absolute trust. How did we travel from that boy to the man who now turned away? I tried to piece it together, the years of struggle, the sacrifices, the long nights I worked 2 jobs so he wouldn't feel the absence of a father. I thought I had built something lasting, yet here I sat, watching strangers' children, realizing mine had become a stranger to me. As the shadows stretched across the plaza, I returned to my room. The silence pressed harder than the day before. My phone vibrated again, lighting up the dim space with its pale glow. Another message waited, the preview line hidden. My hand hovered over it, afraid of what words might come next, afraid of how much lower they could push me. I stared at the screen until the light dimmed, whispering into the empty air. How much lower can they push me? The sun was slanting low across the square, the whitewashed walls glowing like embers against the Andalusian sky. Selene tapped her phone, angling herself toward the light, already rehearsing where she wanted to be when the sun dropped some coastal restaurant golden hour, she called it. I glanced at the small museum just a block away. A flyer taped to a lamppost had shown old photographs of the village black and white faces of people who might have looked like my grandparents. 1 hour, I asked softly. Just 1 hour before dinner. Arthur's eyes flicked toward Selene, then back to me. The reservation's tight, Mom. We should keep moving. My phone, heavy in my hand, showed 22% left. The charger I depended on was tucked into Arthur's day pack. I thought about asking for it, then swallowed the words. I hated how even electricity had become something I had to negotiate. I told myself to keep walking. The logistics of their life felt like chains on mine. By the rental car, Selene swung into the passenger seat, already holding her phone high voice bright for the story she was recording. Golden hour road trip Andalusia dreams, she sang. Arthur opened the trunk briefly, just long enough to toss his jacket inside. I reached for the handle, wanting my small suitcase, but he shut it quickly, locking the trunk. Just meet us in the city, Mom, he said, tone-clipped. Selene added without looking at me, she'll be fine. She made a small circling gesture with her hand, urging him to drive. The engine coughed to life. I stepped forward 2 quick steps, my hand half raised, but the car was already angling down the narrow lane taillights, vanishing into the stone shadows. I stopped. My legs would not move. Around me, life continued. A busker plucked his guitar with practiced ease. A group of teenagers laughed at something private. A dog barked from a balcony. I lowered myself onto a stone bench. My mind began listing what I had left as though reciting could hold me together. Passport, wallet, crossbody bag, phone nearly drained. No charger, no medicine, no change of clothes. My suitcase and everything inside locked in a trunk already miles away. The bench was rough under my hands, but it grounded me as the sharp sting in my chest settled into a hollow emptiness. I forced myself to breathe, to focus on the next minute, then the next. Air, water, shade. I rose and stepped into a tiny cafe marked by a chalkboard scrawled with Wi-Fi gratis. The counter smelled of coffee grounds. With slow English and awkward gestures, I asked for an espresso and the password. The young barista smiled kindly, wrote it down. I typed it in. The signal was weak loading, slowly texts queuing in limbo. I tapped out one sentence to Arthur. I'm safe. My thumb hovered over the call icon, then slid away. The espresso arrived in a chipped cup, bitter and steadying. The barista added a glass of water and pointed to an outlet by the wall. The prongs didn't match my plug. I swallowed hard, thanked him anyway, and wrapped my hands around the cup. Every small choice sip, swallow, sit was a battle against panic. By nightfall, I had rented a bare room above the cafe. The owner, a woman with kind eyes, accepted cash and handed me a brass key. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. My room was narrow, the bed pressed against the wall, sheets thin. I sat down, and the tears finally came quiet, steady, unrelenting. Not the loud sobs of despair, but the kind that flow when the body refuses to hold more. I thought of orthodontist bills, late-night drives, through Texas storms, permission slips signed on kitchen counters I worked double shifts to pay for. Every memory layered itself into the tears, heavy and undeniable. In the dark, I whispered, I will not beg, not tonight. At the small sink, I splashed cold water on my face. I folded my jacket into a pillow and switched my phone to airplane mode, saving what was left of its battery. On the back of a receipt with a borrowed pen, I scrawled 4 words, tomorrow 1 step. I placed it under the glass of water on the nightstand like an anchor. Outside the square quieted. A church bell struck the hour, echoing through the tiled streets. I closed my eyes. The ache was still raw, but beneath it ran a fragile thread of resolve. Then a knock, soft, careful, echoed through the thin door. A woman's voice, hesitant but clear, carried in careful English senora. Do you need help? Morning light seeped through the thin curtains of the little room above the cafe. My head ached from the tears I had let fall into the pillow last night. For a long moment, I simply lay there staring at the cracks in the plaster ceiling, my body heavy as if grief had turned into weight, pressing down on my chest. Slowly, I pushed myself upright and washed my face in the tiny sink. The cool water stung but steadied me. I whispered to myself, Stand straight, Lorraine. When I stepped outside, the square was calm. Vendors rolled carts into place, setting out fruit and bread. The cobblestones glistened faintly from a night dew. Life moved on, unbothered by the absence of one woman left behind. A knock sounded on the doorframe. A woman slender, with streaks of silver hair tucked into a scarf, stood there with a kind but cautious smile. Good morning. I'm Isolde, she said in careful English. Her voice was soft, deliberate, as though she had practiced. She carried a tray with bread, cheese, and a small cup of coffee. Breakfast, she added, gesturing. I hesitated, then invited her in. We sat on the edge of the bed, the tray balanced between us. She let me eat in silence. When I tried to thank her, my voice cracked. You are far from home, she said. Yes, I admitted and left behind. She looked at me, then her dark eyes reflecting something deeper than sympathy. I once knew what it was to be left behind, too. The words sank into me like a stone dropping into still water. Someone else understood. In that moment, her presence was more than food or shelter. It was an anchor in a sea that threatened to pull me under. Later in the cafe downstairs, Isolde's grandson lent me a phone charger. I plugged it into the wall, watching the tiny percentage climb. A strange relief filled me at the sight of the battery rising proof that I was not completely powerless. Isolde placed a plate before me. Eat. Strength first plans. Later, she said firmly. I obeyed. The bread was crusty, the cheese sharp. As I chewed, I thought of my mother long gone who used to remind me, never sit at a table hungry. It clouds the mind. I felt steadier, grounded by both memory and kindness. When the phone finally connected to the Wi-Fi, it flooded with notifications, messages, photos, updates. My thumb hovered, then tapped. Celine's social media lit up the screen photos of her and Arthur smiling by the coast sun, behind them glasses raised in a toast. The caption read, "Just us two circadventure." My stomach twisted. I zoomed in. Draped over Celine's bag was my scarf, the blue one I always carried on long trips. A piece of me, my memory, my belonging displayed as hers, erased from the story. I sat very still, the cafe buzzing around me. Betrayal didn't always shout. Sometimes it posted a picture, added a caption, and pretended the world was whole. I closed the phone. Without comment, without tears. "Thank you," I said to Isolde, meaning far more than breakfast. She touched my hand briefly, and I rose. In the square, the sun warmed the stones. Vendors called out prices. Life wove itself forward. I whispered to the air, "They believe they erased me. They have no idea what silence can hold." The square woke slowly, carts rattling over stone and ribbons of sunlight sliding across white walls. I sat outside the cafe with coffee cupped in both hands, letting the heat teach my breath to settle. Isolde set down toast and moved on without questions. A vendor sang the prices of figs. A child laughed. A bell marked the half hour. I made myself notice each ordinary sound, a fence against panic. On the back of a receipt, I wrote a list: water cash charger returned pharmacy. The pen wobbled. Across the square, linens fluttered like small flags. I tried to pass as another traveler, a woman taking her time. Make-believe can be a bridge between heartbeats. I breathed and practiced being a person no one could shove aside. Their shadows reached me before their words. Arthur and Celine stepped out of the lane as if arriving for a photo, not a conversation. He kept his sunglasses on. She wore a camera-ready smile. "We won't stay," Celine said, setting her phone face down. Arthur slid an envelope across the table with 2 fingers, as if it might stain him. "For your own good, Mom," he said, not meeting my eyes. A fly landed on the rim of my cup. I shook it off. The paper was heavy, the kind chosen to make lies feel official. Inside were neat tabs, a sticker, a blue pen clipped to the side. "It's just housekeeping," Celine murmured. Arthur added, "It reduces confusion while you travel." I had spent years reducing confusion tax forms at midnight paychecks, stretched like taffy lights kept on by one more class taught. I read the top page twice before the meaning stood up. Bank authorizations transfer of rights for streamlined management. Property documents, temporary reassignment of authority to facilitate decisions. Beneficiary updates to reflect present realities. Boxes for my initials, a line for my full name and today's date. Celine had planted sticky flags where she wanted me to obey. My fingers remembered mortgage coupons, stovetop dinners, braces paid off dollar by dollar. The world narrowed to 3 printed words: sign here, here. "You trust us?" Celine said, still smiling. "This will make everything smoother." She sipped from my water without asking. Arthur traced the table's grain with one finger like a boy caught stealing. "It's safer," he said. "If something happened, we could act." Something had happened. They had left me standing in the square while they posed as if devotion were effortless. I turned the page. In clean legal language, my years were being repackaged as inconvenience. I pictured the kitchen where I signed field trip slips. I remembered the clunk of the washer on winter nights and a boy asleep in the back seat while I waited for a fever to break. No one had flagged those lines for my initials. I closed the folder and smoothed the edges. I uncapped the blue pen, then capped it again, the click loud as a gavel in my chest. Celine leaned forward. "We need to catch a train," she said, impatience ghosting her tone. Arthur still hadn't removed the sunglasses. I slid the envelope back toward them. "Not today," I said. The square did not hush, but it felt like it. Celine blinked. "I don't think you understand." "I understand," I said. "You brought me papers while my suitcase is still with you. You chose a public place because you thought I'd avoid a scene. You're correct. I won't make one. Not today." Arthur's mouth opened, then closed. "Mom, we're just trying to help." "Then help," I said, "by returning what is mine." I stood. The chair scraped a careful line across the stone. Celine's smile thinned. "You're being emotional." "I'm being awake." I kept my hand steady. "Take the envelope." Arthur picked it up, fumbling with the flap as if it burned. They stepped back in unison, choreography learned from months of practicing us two in every mirror. Celine met my eyes with a look that promised consequences. I let the moment pass through me without lodging. When they were gone, the table felt like a stage after the curtain props left in place. Audience dismissed. I sat again because my knees were shaking, and I preferred the pigeons to witness it. The market carried on. A woman bargained for oranges in a voice that sounded like my grandmother. I finished the toast because food is a kind of promise. Dusk folded itself into the lanes by the time I climbed the narrow stairs to my room. I set my phone to charge and placed a scrap of paper on the desk. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and warm dust. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling until the plaster looked like continents I might still cross. The window held a slice of sky the color between blue and gray that keeps the first star. I sat up and said softly, "They believe my silence is weakness. Saying it made it smaller. I see it." On the desk lay my receipt list. I turned it over and wrote in letters I could read. Even if tears came, I would not let fall. Silence is a shield when it is chosen. Tomorrow, bank embassy numbers, pharmacy, a plan. I folded the note and tucked it into my wallet behind my license, next to a photo of Arthur at 11 with frosting on his chin. The building settled. Footsteps crossed the hall. Somewhere, a television murmured the news. I switched off the lamp and lay down, palms open like a person surrendering and a person preparing both at once. Into the dim, I said, "This silence will be the answer they never expected." I woke before dawn, the thin curtains letting in the first light of the Andalusian morning. My eyes went to the small wooden table, still bare. No envelope lay there, no reminder of the betrayal, only the echo of it. Yet the memory sat heavy, as if the papers had burned their shape into the wood. I thought of the years I had worked 2 jobs scraping and saving, telling myself it would all mean security one day, and then, in one moment, they had asked me to sign it all away. I pressed my palms flat against the table and whispered into the quiet, "Not me. Not yet." The day began slowly. I walked to the cafe where the air carried the smell of espresso and warm bread. My steps were measured, not rushed, but each one carried the weight of decision. I sat at my usual table under the shade, the sound of vendors setting up their stalls behind me. I told myself I would not avoid them. If they came, I would meet them head on. Sure enough, not long after Arthur and Celine arrived. Arthur avoided my eyes. Celine wore her soft smile, the one that always seemed too polished. She placed an envelope on the table with a quiet click. "It's just paperwork, Mom. Don't overthink," she said, as if yesterday's attempt had never happened. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, letting the heat steady me. I didn't rush. I simply set the cup down, drew the envelope closer, and slipped out the first page. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from focus. Then without a word, I began to tear. Once down the middle, again into quarters. The sound was sharp, final. Arthur stammered, "Mom, what are you doing?" Celine's smile cracked, her eyes flashing. I stacked the torn pieces, neatly slid them back into the envelope, and pushed it across the table. Only then did I speak, my voice calm, deliberate. "This is my answer." The silence that followed was louder than shouting. Arthur's mouth opened and closed without words. Selena's face froze as if the world had slipped out of her grip. I stood, gathered my bag, and walked away. My knees trembled, but my spine held straight. Back at the inn, Isolde noticed the way I carried myself. She didn't ask for details. Instead, she poured tea, set it gently before me, and said, "You chose your ground." I nodded, sipping slowly. The warmth spread through me, anchoring me in a way I hadn't felt in days. That night, I pulled out a scrap of paper and wrote one sentence. "Sometimes rebellion needs no sound." I slipped it beneath my pillow, letting the words hold me steady. The village was quiet, save for a dog barking in the distance. When I finally closed my eyes, my phone buzzed against the wooden nightstand. I turned it over. Arthur's name lit up the screen with a message. "Please, Mom, call me back." The market smelled of oranges and fresh bread when I stepped out that morning. I carried a handful of small coins in my palm, trying to count them twice before choosing apples from a wooden crate. The vendor smiled politely, handed me a small paper bag, and I nodded in thanks. For a moment, I felt grounded. The sun was warm, but not harsh. The voices of children echoed down the narrow street, and I told myself that maybe, just maybe, I could hold on to a little peace. My life had been reduced to these tiny purchases: a coin for fruit, a nod of gratitude, and a whispered prayer that I could make it through the day. I lingered near the fountain in the square, the bag of apples in my hand, when I heard laughter that carried too easily across the plaza. Arthur and Celine appeared, their clothes crisp, their posture theatrical. Celine adjusted her sunglasses, tugged Arthur close for a picture, their laughter bright and practiced. The villagers and tourists paused, admiring them as if they were celebrities. I stood still, a shadow at the edge of their performance. Celine's voice rang out in English louder than needed. "Oh, don't mind her," she called toward the small crowd, gesturing casually in my direction. "She just follows us around." The words hung in the air, like a stone dropped into still water. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. A woman at the bakery window frowned. A young couple glanced between Celine and me, their expressions soft with pity. My cheeks burned. I lowered my eyes to the stones beneath my feet, the bag of apples suddenly heavy in my hand. In that instant, I wasn't a mother or a woman who had built a life through sacrifice. I was a stray tagged labeled dismissed. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My silence was my only shield, though inside, humiliation pricked every vein. A photographer wandered into the square, offering snapshots to tourists for a few euros. Celine pulled Arthur in again, their smiles perfectly rehearsed. The shutter clicked again. I stepped aside, pressing myself near a column, but I caught sight of myself in the glossy screen. My figure blurred at the edge, my face half turned. Later that afternoon, a small set of prints hung for display at the corner stand. Among them was the photo Arthur and Celine posed against the bright square, radiant golden. And yet something else caught me a sharp edge, a crude cut. The reflection that had been mine was gone. The space where my body should have been was trimmed neatly away, leaving a clean border around their two perfect smiles. I stood frozen, staring at the hollow where I had been erased. It was one thing to be ignored, another to be written out of my own family's story. Now it was physical, real, undeniable. The evidence of my existence had been cut away with scissors tossed aside. I turned from the display before anyone could notice my expression. My hand clenched around the fruit bag as if it were a lifeline. I walked through the market's winding lanes, each step deliberate, refusing to let the tremor in my chest spill into my face. My silence felt heavier now, both a prison and the only dignity left to me. Back at the inn, I placed the apples on the small wooden table and left them untouched. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, steadying my breath. They erased me in public, but I am still here. As the evening shadows stretched across the square, a knock came at my door. Isolde stood there, her hands gentle but firm, holding out a photograph. It was the same picture patched with tape, my blurred reflection pieced back into the frame. "Someone should remember you," she said quietly. I took it with both hands, feeling the weight of paper and memory. The room was hushed, only the wind brushing against the shutters and the occasional bark of a distant dog. At 3 a.m, the village seemed suspended in time. My phone buzzed against the nightstand, the glow startling against the dark. I turned my head slowly, eyes half closed, watching the screen light up with Arthur's name. One missed call, then another. Then the screen pulsed with messages, "Mom, please." Another, "Don't make this harder." Then silence. Then again, "I'm worried about you." The words dripped with guilt, but I stayed still. My breath came steady, each inhale deliberate. I did not answer. I did not give them the power of my voice. My silence was my choice. The phone finally stilled. I closed my eyes, but a new vibration broke through the quiet. This time, it wasn't Arthur. The number began with a Texas area code. My chest tightened. I let the voicemail take it. When I pressed play, a calm professional voice filled the room. "This is Mrs. Lorraine Hart. Correct, I'm calling from First Continental Bank Compliance Desk. We've received an expedited transfer request involving your account. We need confirmation before releasing funds." My stomach turned cold. The clerk's words were clipped but polite. He read out partial digits of my account digits I knew. He gave a timestamp yesterday morning, U.S. time. The message ended with, "Please return our call to confirm authorization." I sat motionless on the edge of the bed. The attempt was live. The silence here in Spain was being used as a cover back home. My own absence had become their weapon. By dawn, I could no longer stay still. I went downstairs. The cafe was dark, but Isolda was already unlocking the front door, her shawl wrapped tight against the morning chill. She saw my face and said nothing, only motioned me inside and set down a pot of tea. She scribbled the Wi-Fi password on a slip of paper, slid it toward me, and stepped back. Her silence was kindness. I opened my laptop and then my phone, logging into my email. Spam folder, 2 new messages with unfamiliar docu-links. I clicked through, carefully downloading copies, saving them into a new folder. My hands shook, but I made myself slow down. I pressed each key as if it mattered. Metadata saved, dates preserved. I was a teacher once I knew the value of documentation. The files opened PDFs labeled Authorization Draft. My name stretched across the top in bold. At the bottom, a signature block mimicked the curve of my old e-signature, traced with unsettling precision. The notary section sat blank, waiting to be filled. A second draft appeared, listing a joint transfer into a new account. The mailing address was Arthur and Celine's condo. I leaned back, air heavy in my lungs. This wasn't speculation. It wasn't a fear whispered in the dark. It was proof. They were trying to strip away the very life I had built, line by line, number by number. I pulled up my travel itinerary saved in photos, boarding passes, digital check-in screenshots. The timestamps contradicted the possibility that I could have signed in person. Proof layered upon proof. Betrayal had never felt so sharp, so clean. I took photographs of the screen of the timestamps and began a handwritten list on the back of a receipt call, the bank fraud line at U.S. Morning Request. Freezes ask for IP logs, notify my credit union, step by step. Each line steadied me. I opened a new message draft to Arthur. "Do not contact my bank again. I am recording all activity." I saved it unsent, leaving it like a blade still in its sheath. As the sun climbed and light washed across the tiled rooftops, my phone rang again. The same Texas number appeared. My fingers hovered, then pressed accept. "This is Lorraine," I said, voice steady. On the other end, the clerk replied, "Ma'am, are you ready to confirm that transfer?" The morning light in Andalusia was sharp and white, pouring into the cafe as if it meant to strip away shadows. I sat at the corner table with Isolda's small ceramic cup in front of me, the phone pressed to my ear. The Texas number hummed against the line. Mrs. Hart, the clerk, asked, voice calm and professional, "We need to verify some details." I recited what only the bank would know, partial digits, a security question from a tax refund years ago. My voice stayed level. When he asked if I was ready to approve the transfer, I answered, "No." Put an immediate hold on all outgoing wires. There was a pause, the faint clicking of keys. Understood. I'll escalate this to a fraud case. A supervisor will call you shortly to confirm. I ended the call with my heart pounding, but my hands steady. For once, I felt the floor tilt in my direction. The supervisor's voice came through within minutes, more clipped, more formal. "Mrs. Hart, we've received digital documents with your name. Do you have means to send us identification?" I pulled my passport from my bag, laid it on the cafe's table, and snapped clear photos. I also dug through my email for an old scan of a canceled tax check, my real signature at the bottom. I sent both. The line was quiet as they compared. Then the supervisor's tone sharpened. The submitted e-signature does not match. The pressure points differ. The L in Lorraine has a double curve here that yours does not. And there's a faint copy-paste shadow around the loop. It's a fabrication. Cold anger slid through me. Years of signing permission slips, mortgage checks, and teaching contracts, and now my name was just a forgery on a stolen file. The supervisor added, "Additionally, the timestamp logs show an IP located in the U.S. Your phone pinged from Spain at the same time. That contradiction supports your case." I thanked him voice even though my hands trembled. Proof was stacking itself one page at a time. By late morning, Isolde appeared at my side with her shawl and said softly, "Come, a friend will help you." She led me through narrow streets to a modest office marked with a brass plaque, Notaria Rosa. Inside, Rosa was brisk but kind. She scanned my passport, stamped forms with her seal, and wrote an affidavit in both Spanish and English. It read clearly, Mrs. Lorraine Hart was physically present in Andalusia, Spain, on the date in question and could not have executed documents in the United States. I requested 2 certified sets. Rosa nodded, sliding them into envelopes with embossed seals. "Paper tells the truth when people don't," she said. Her words sank into me like an anchor. Back at the cafe, I logged into email. A new message from the fraud supervisor blinked, case ID established. Full wire freeze for 30 days. We are requesting IP logs from the e-signature vendor. Preliminary data shows a mobile IP traced to an address in Dallas, Texas. My breath caught. Dallas. Arthur and Celine's condo. I closed the laptop, slowly pressing my palm against the cool wood of the table. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was a line of ink leading straight back to them. By afternoon, my phone buzzed with fresh messages. "Arthur first, Mom. Why would you freeze the accounts? We needed that money for the house." Then Celine, sharp-edged, "If you want to play this way, we can lawyer up." I typed 3 words. Paper tells truth, then left them unsent, saved in drafts like a blade, sheathed for later. Outside, the square glowed under the Andalusian sun, voices rising and fading like tides. I lifted my eyes to the church tower, feeling the weight shift off my chest, just slightly. Then another email appeared. Next step, recorded statement under oath remote. "Are you available tomorrow, 10:00 a.m., Texas, 5:00 p.m., Spain?" I stared at the screen, steady, now ready. I set up the cafe corner like a small office chair, pulled close to the wall, outlet, laptop, open phone on a coaster to keep the mic clear. Afternoon light washed the tiles. Isolde brought tea, squeezed my shoulder once, and left me with the soft clink of the cup. I breathed in, breathed out, and opened the link the bank had sent. My reflection hovered in the camera preview, older, yes, but steady. 2 faces appeared in neat rectangles. "Good evening, Mrs. Hart," the fraud supervisor said. Beside him, a woman introduced herself as counsel for the bank. They confirmed the session was being recorded, then asked if I would swear to speak truthfully. I raised my right hand. The gesture felt simple and enormous at the same time. We began with my timeline. I described the village, the date stamps on my passport, the notarized affidavit with its crisp seal, my hours in the cafe, the morning the alleged signature was captured. I took my time and did not decorate the facts. When I finished, the counsel asked me to hold each document to the camera and then upload the scanned copies through the secure link. I did both. "Thank you," she said. "Please stay with us while we compare logs." The screen changed to a shared window, filled with dense rows of text. The supervisor's cursor circled an entry. "Here is the login event tied to your e-signature. The IP maps to a Dallas condo. The device ID corresponds to a mobile number on file for Arthur Hart." He waited, perhaps expecting me to react. I kept my face neutral and let the silence carry the weight. Next, he pulled up my phone records supplied by my carrier under consent. "Your handset pinged in southern Spain at the same minute." That contradiction is material. Counsel added gently, "It supports your position that the request was not authorized by you." A second document appeared an image of the e-signature. Even on the screen, I could see the flaw, the loop on the L to smooth the tail of the T glued in place. Counsel zoomed in. There is a faint border artifact around this curve. It suggests the signature was lifted from a prior file and repositioned. My mouth went dry, but my voice stayed calm. I did not sign those papers. "We believe you," she said. They asked about my relationship to Arthur and his wife. I did not give a speech. I said I had raised my son alone, that I supported him into adulthood, and that our recent trip had highlighted painful differences. I did not use the word abandonment. It did not need to be said for them to understand. Counsel glanced at her notes. "There was a prior verification call to the bank last week. We have a transcript." She read a line in a careful voice, Arthur just say, "Mom agreed already." She paused, then added, "The speaker is identified as Celine on caller ID." Something low and cold moved through me. I wrote the sentence on a small notepad, each word landing like a nail. They continued. The supervisor listed next steps, a 30-day freeze already in place, a request for full IP and device logs from the vendor, an internal alert to block any fresh attempts to add beneficiaries. He asked if I wished to make a victim statement on record. I said yes. I spoke for less than a minute. I said theft is not only money, it is the taking of a name, a signature, a lifetime of work, and pressing it onto a form as if none of it mattered. I said my dignity was not available for transfer. When I finished, the counsel's jaw had set in a quiet way that told me she understood. We closed the call after final confirmations. The recording light blinked off. The room felt larger. Outside, a child laughed in the square. A motor scooter stitched the afternoon together and passed. I sat still until my hands stopped shaking, then slid the affidavit back into my satchel. Isolde returned as if she had been standing just beyond the doorway for the exact number of breaths I needed. She did not ask how it went. She simply refreshed my tea and said, "Keep your papers dry." It sounded like a prayer. My phone buzzed twice. A message from the bank case escalated to a federal fraud unit. Investigators might contact me early next week for a sworn follow-up. I read it twice, not for doubt, but to feel the shape of the words. They had tried to erase me. Instead, the record now carried my name in ink they could not peel away. I closed the laptop, tucked every document into plastic sleeves, and locked my bag. The light outside had shifted to amber. Somewhere beyond the square bells marked the hour. I stood taller than when I sat down and whispered to the empty cup, "Let the truth do its work." Before I left the table, I opened my drafts and added one more unsent note to Arthur, a single sentence that read, "Do not speak for me." I did not send it. Instead, I forwarded the call invitation, the transcript excerpt, and the bank's freeze notice to my own secondary email. I wrote the phrase from the transcript again on my pad, then tore the page free and slipped it behind the clear cover of my notebook where I could see it without reopening the wound. Proof did not erase hurt. It arranged it. It gave the ache a box to sit in so I could walk. At the door, I thanked Isolde and asked if the quiet corner would be free tomorrow evening. "For you," she said, "always." I stepped into the hallway with my satchel heavy at my hip, and my steps balanced a woman carrying her own name. I woke to the late evening quiet and the steady gray of my phone screen. An email banner waited like a closed door. I opened it with both hands. The bank thanked me for my cooperation-listed exhibits by number and ended with one line that loosened something in my chest. "You are protected. The matter is closed on your end." I read it twice. I set the phone down and pressed my palms to the table. Air in, air out. The room steadied. Another ping. A second notice from the fraud unit said the evidence had been preserved and forwarded. There were case numbers, dates, and a summary of the attempted transfer. I forwarded the message to my backup email, then copied the files to my thumb drive. Paper had done what love could not. It held still, spoke plainly, and asked for nothing in return. Music drifted from a radio in the square. I stepped to the window. The village was soft with evening white walls, boys kicking a ball, a woman watering geraniums. Somewhere, a pan clinked. A dog answered with a sleepy bark. Life continuing without a vote from anyone. When I turned back, 2 texts waited. Arthur first, you destroyed us. Then Celine, you'll regret this. I stared at the screen until the letters felt like random marks. I put the phone face down and slid it away. Love is not a permission slip to take what is not yours. I lit the desk lamp and pulled a sheet of paper from the inn's pad. I wrote the date and below it my son's name, the way I had printed it on school folders and Little League slips. I wrote slowly. I told him about the time we split a grilled cheese in the car after practice because we could not afford 2 meals. I told him about the 3rd grade play when the curtain stuck and he bowed anyway. Then I wrote the part that does not fit in pictures. A mother's job is not to keep a man a boy. It is to tell the truth when the truth matters, even when it is heavy. I wrote that I would not sign my name to lies and that one day he might be grateful I refused the kind of help that burns down a life. I did not edit. I did not apologize. When the page filled, I kept going on the back. I wished him work that makes him tired in the good way, and friends who tell him the truth, before flattery and a home where no one throws away a history to look carefree on a phone. I said my door, wherever it is, remains unlocked to remorse and change, not to bargains. I folded the letter into thirds, slid it into an envelope, wrote his address, and did not add a stamp. I left the envelope in my satchel unsent. Some words are better kept close. I turned off the lamp and walked downstairs into the square with the letter tucked away, my hands empty. Night had warmed the tiles. A guitarist played near the fountain, and children crossed the square like small comets. I bought tea and sat at the edge to watch. People talk about starting over as if a person throws a switch. It is smaller than that. It is 1 cup, 1 bench, 1 minute of choosing to sit where laughter happens and let it reach you. Isolde waved from the cafe doorway and when her hands were free, joined me. She did not ask about the email. I told her anyway in 1 sentence. She listened and nodded once. Good, she said. Then tonight you sleep. We walked back under street lamps. At the stairs, we paused. She touched my forearm and went on. In my room, I lined up the documents, zipped the satchel, and set it by the door. I slept like someone who has placed heavy boxes on the correct shelf. Before sunrise, the sky was the color of an unripe peach. I met Isolde on the terrace. She handed me coffee and a slice of bread brushed with oil. She asked no questions, so I found myself speaking. They tried to erase me, I said. Instead, I found myself. Then it was worth the storm, she answered. We talked about small things, the market hours, the best place to buy a scarf, the train schedule to the city. I took notes in the margin of yesterday's receipt. The future did not need a speech. It needed a list. When the sun cleared, the roofline, light moved across the square like a slow tide. I stood and shouldered my satchel. I paid for our breakfast and tucked the receipt into my wallet behind the affidavit. At the corner, the street dropped toward the bus stop. I glanced back once at the terrace. Isolde lifted her cup. Then I walked. My steps felt like my own. I did not look for a shadow to make the walking valid. I did not measure the road by anyone else's pace. I walked because the day had opened and because I could. My phone buzzed as I reached the end of the lane. 2 more messages waited. I did not open them. Whatever they said could live inside the little glass box without me for a while. I slid the phone into my bag and kept moving. The bus engine coughed awake. I climbed the steps, found a seat by the window, and set my satchel on my lap. As the village slipped behind, the white walls turned to bright strips, then to a single band of light, then to memory. I rested my forehead against the glass. There was grief, still a familiar weight. But there was something else. Beside it now room. Room to carry my name without tutoring anyone on how to say it. Room to plant a garden back in Texas, to learn a recipe to read on the porch without waiting for a car to pull in. Room to lock my door at night and know the lock is mine. The bus rounded a curve. The sun rose higher. I did not wave goodbye. I did not need to. What mattered had already come with me. When I look back on everything I went through, I've learned one truth I want to share with you. Silence is not weakness. It can be a shield, a way of holding on to dignity when others try to erase you. No matter how much someone you love may betray you, you still have the power to protect yourself, to rebuild, and to choose your own future. My story is not just about loss. It's about finding strength in unexpected places and realizing that survival means more than enduring it, means choosing where to stand. What about you? Have you ever felt left out or overlooked by the very people you trusted most? How did you find your way forward? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story touched your heart, drop a 1 below or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with it, share why I value every perspective. If you'd like to join me for more stories that carry lessons of family resilience and healing, please subscribe to the channel. Together we can keep building a space where every story matters.